I guess my disclosure is I use Twitter. I am an advocate for it, but I wanted to provide a bit of an emphasis on some of the potential pitfalls and a word of caution when you're using this tool, which again, it's very helpful. They've talked to you about the advantages in detail. But the reality is that there are some potential pitfalls that you might need to take into account. Some of these pitfalls that I would say I see, it's rare that I don't see this in every other week, is some related to patient privacy, to HIPAA. There's, you can it potentially impact the institutional policies of where you work and others, as shown here in this slide. And this is increasingly being recognized by healthcare institutions. At least best to my knowledge, I think some of the pioneers in this regard have been at Mayo Clinic, where they developed actually a dedicated Mayo Clinic social media network, which is spearheaded by, I think, a department of 4 to 6 people who this is their job, to try to come up with guidelines for employees to maximize the use of social media for either advocacy, research, education, or what not your purpose is. But again, trying to understand how to use this without falling into some of the potential pitfalls. And if you look, this is adapted from the Mayo Clinic social media guidelines. The reality is that I think many of us that use this, many of us will identify the institution where you work at, your affiliation. And if you do that, the reality is that your behavior online needs to be consistent with the institutional standards of professional conduct. Otherwise, there's potential for trouble. Here's just an example. I didn't want to use real posts. This is for illustration purposes. This is what you might see in Twitter, or for those that are not there, or for those that use it. So here's, for example, let's say it's Andreas Grutzik back in September 14th, 1977, and he says, "Great case. 38-year-old gentleman with angina, now post-successful Benunia angioplasty to LAD. Hashtag, Chadi talked to you about the power of the hashtag. Hashtag strive for greatness, hashtag cabbage laughs." So the reality is that, you see things like this, which are very nice. You can advocate for what you do, but, here's the age, 38-year-old. The physician's name. You probably know the location, and you probably know the date. And if the procedure is rare, which at this time this was not as common, you may potentially identify there are opportunities for some pitfalls. So they're walking a thin line, and the reality is that you can connect the dots. There may be potential patient identifiable data. You know who the physician is if they identify themselves. The practice location on affiliation date, and if the procedure is rare, again, it creates opportunities for gaps and potential trouble. So there are risks and benefits to using this tool, and I think there are many benefits, but again, there are some precautions that you need to take into account if you're going to maximize the use of it. And here, this is a slide that I think summarizes that in some way, which is, I think here, for example, at CVI, you've just seen posters, you've seen abstracts, you've seen PowerPoint slides of complications in detail, talking about things that, sometimes go south, and there are also case reports. But the reality is that, well, certainly you can access to it. These are mostly closed networks of clinicians, physicians, cardiologists that we're sharing and learning from each other. However, when you engage in social media, it's really an open network. Now, whatever it is you're commenting, this is open to the world. This is open to colleagues from the public department, from PR, administrators, patients, people that may not understand the implications of what you're trying to communicate, maybe just to colleagues. So it's really a message to the world. So again, you have to be in some way careful with that, or at least understand the implications of such. And people have talked about, should there be policies, should be guidelines about this. The reality is that it's not any different from any institutional guideline as to not talking about a patient in an elevator or nothing like that. But one that I think happens commonly, at least in interventional cardiology, is that we're showing angiograms, we're showing fluoros, we're showing sometimes how you do access or things like that. So there needs to be some degree of caution of what can and cannot be done in regards particularly to patient privacy and the release of patient information and photography and video. And this is just something to throw out. I don't mean this is a particular consent form that is just for the release of patient identifiable information. So we need some help here with the...
I think we lost our slides.
Oh, here we go. Let me see it again. So that, while I bring you back to that, so there are consent forms, and I'm sure you've seen this probably at all of your institutions, that if there is a particular a particular value of showing a story in the news and interviewing the patient and the patient giving their perspective. Institutions do have consent forms for patient identifiable information. But now as we're using this tool more for educational purposes and sharing, as I said, fluoro, sinus, and so on, I asked the question, should there or not be a dedicated consent form to share non-patient identifiable data in social media, particularly because it's a public forum in which not only physicians are accessing. And this brings me back again to what I was talking about social media and affiliation. Is the reality is that you need to be aware that you're speaking for yourself, not the institution. So right in first person, here I think Chadi and Sheila have done this well. And some of the institutions, such as the social media guidelines at Mayo, will clearly express that suggest that you have a disclaimer, that your views are your own individual personal views, not the ones you employ, particularly if you're advocating for some particular thing. And the reality is also that patients are going to look up for you in Google. They're going to say, I'm going to see Dr. Sahni. I'm going to see Dr. Chadi Alraies. And as soon as they Google you, if you're on social media, in many cases, the first response is going to be on Google, essentially your social media account. So depending on how you use that, it may be good or not good. And this, I think, has been well described in detail in the news, in Medscape and others. But the reality is that we should not forget that whatever you post is there forever, even after you delete it. And it may have potential implications professionally. Again, just to emphasize, the comments are public. This was at least, I've been in Twitter since 2009. But this is the first time that I see that, same as it happens in other spheres, that essentially comments from physicians in Twitter were used to build a news story. So again, just something that you be careful when you're tweeting. So the practical advice is that essentially behave as if you were part of a panel in a national meeting. Be professional, be respectful, use good judgment. And if you are a person of influence, if you're a recognized researcher or a recognized clinician, you will be looked up to, as they told you. People are going to look up to your advice, to what you suggest as a practical tip in the cath lab. So be accurate and honest in your opinions, because people will use this, and that's what's happening. This is a whole other aspect that one could talk at length, but the reality is that I think many of us have been this at some point, either at night, at midnight, or when we wake up in the morning, look at the phone. So there are other potential implications of using social media to lifestyle, relationship, work, and sleep. So to wrap up, and I think we want to make this more interactive in what's remained there just to address question, my conclusions are that you must always safeguard patient privacy. No names, dates, locations, no unique patient identifiable information. And one of the advice that at least I've received is that if you are ever going to post some sort of case, try to avoid time association. Don't do it tonight. Do it within a couple of months, couple of weeks. Avoid time association. Also behave as if you were a panelist in a national meeting. Be professional, be respectful. Pause and think before you post, and use these precautions to avoid the potential pitfalls of social media. I think we're going to have a discussion, and I want to thank, of course, all the social media network at Mayo that helped me build this up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yader. That's a great perspective and precautions we all need to take. We're going to open it up for questions, but I'm going to actually start by asking a question to Dr. Nadu, who has joined us for the first time, although he's always wanted to. He's been busy. And I know you shouldn't call on your attendings, but you have a very niche hypertrophic cardiomyopathy center. And I know that you opened the center because I follow you on Facebook, and I saw the ribbon cutting ceremony, and you've been really great about sharing also your Sky advocacy efforts and how you've campaigned for us. And I followed that in LA as a fellow on Facebook. And I think that's going to hopefully increase your Twitter presence. But can you tell me how you used social media to promote your program and your niche?
I'm new to it. I think I'm learning from you guys. And I was actually going to tweet just now that you're never too old to learn. And I think it's a great lesson that you can learn from people younger than you. People have different skill sets that we all can learn from. I'm still learning from Tim, and he's only 12 years old sometimes. But so I think over the past year, I changed my approach to it after seeing that it is powerful. And I never really embraced social media even for personal purposes. So personally, I keep Instagram as my personal thing with my child and pictures of all those things. But then Facebook, LinkedIn, and now Twitter, I'm using more for business growth. And so when I moved jobs, I decided that I'm no longer looking at my hospital as a place that I see patients, but it's a place where I'm launching more of a national practice. And so I'm looking to get hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients from the world and all over. And so to do that, you really have to, it doesn't matter, as long as you have all the resources at your place, people will come. And so, and we've had a bunch of that over the past year. So once I realized that, I realized that I have to sort of micromanage my presence online. So what I do is, and I'm a novice, I have no idea, I'm coming to learn, but I keep track of important things that are happening with the program that I think are reasonable to announce. And I put those up in timed episodes, like maybe no more than one a week, something like that. And I keep a list of achievements or things that are newsworthy about the program, be that either research that comes out or offices that open up or important patient stories or brochures or upcoming conferences that are related to it. And I cycle them through, either in sequence or staged with the different platforms. And then that's kind of what I've been doing so far. But I'm here to also learn to see how I can build it even further than that. So.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
If I can ask some questions. So, First of all, I'm grateful to Yader because he got me in Twitter last year. I was seeing, at the time I was like, this is disaster. Why are you wasting your time? But then actually we learned many good things. The snuff box radial. Showing all the pictures, how doing. I'm like, there's some value to this. And then we had some question, actually, some radial issue couldn't get up, and we posted it and got like 17 tweets back in a few minutes. So actually, I love this part. However, I fell off the wagon because I realized if you go in there and you start tweeting, then you're going to get tweets back. And then how much time do you have to do all this? So that's one question I want to ask you. How do you keep up with all this avalanche? Because I think it's geometric. You start and it gets geometric. And then the other component is, what is the ultimate goal, right? You're doing this, what's the ultimate goal? Learn, network, marketing? I mean, what is the ultimate goal? So just curious to get your thoughts, since you guys are the experts on this.
So, Dr. Berlakis, I pulled up this slide specifically for you because Dr. Rao mentioned earlier that you have excellent YouTube videos. And I had this idea. If you look here, you can feed your YouTube in the green circle to your Twitter. And you can just link that. And that would be something that if you did get replies and responses, you could easily respond to the videos that you've already created. I think we should feed the question about how do you keep up with responses to Dr. Rao, as I know that he has a very good way of responding to everything, and he's very active in a lot of the polls.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. I mean, it can be a little bit of a rabbit hole if you get really involved in it. But I think that people use it in different ways. I mean, there are some people who tweet a lot. I mean, Mike Gibson obviously is very involved in that. But the nice thing about the way Twitter works, at least from my somewhat novice perspective, is that you do get notifications if people have responded to your tweet. So even if you're off of it for a couple of days, you can go to your notifications and figure out what the conversation is about it. One of the reasons that I had avoided social media for a long time, I think I told the story at Sky. I joined Twitter originally several years ago, around the time that the Mumbai train station bombing happened, because my dad had heard about how the news broke on Twitter, and he said, you got to get on Twitter. I said, okay, I'll get on Twitter. He said, you got to follow me. So I started following my dad, and I realized that what he was tweeting was, I am watching TV. I am now drinking coffee. And I was like, look, Dad, life is too short. I cannot handle this kind of... So I got off of it. And then at the Fellows course, they forced me to join Twitter, and it became pretty obvious that...
That was the third time we asked you, by the way.
Right. But it became pretty obvious that, if you're doing a CTO course, you're reaching the people in that room. Or if they're coming to get proctored by you, you're reaching those two people. But this is a platform that's international, so you can reach a lot more people very, very quickly and almost in real time. So it's a very powerful educational tool. And again, it's a tool, so you use it the way you want to get what you want done. So I think Manos' question about what the endpoint is a very good one, and that's what you have to ask yourself if you're going to get on social media. Why do you want to get on it? Is it to connect with your colleagues? Is it to educate? Is it to ask questions about clinical situations that you have a question about? Or is it all of the above? And that's how you should use it. It is very easy to start using it and forget that you have a frontal lobe. And that is where you start getting into trouble. And so you just have to be aware that everything that you put on there is basically being broadcast to everybody in the world. And there have been lots of high-profile people who have gotten in trouble with that. So I think that's one of the risks of it.
Thank you.
I think if you look at it, everybody's going to have if you have 100% of time, right? And then you're going to have to figure out how much time do you have. At certain stages, you may have more time. And then Mike Gibson may have more time. You may have more time. But you may have different time for different things. If you're very busy, like I'm imagining Manos is in the cath lab at 2 a.m. every day, pretty much. So, I mean, he may not have as much time. My last job, where I was director of the Cath Lab Winthrop, I had constructed a job where I had extra time because I had a good amount of administrative time. So at some point, you have time to do those things. In other jobs, the job I'm building now, I have less time. It's more clinical time. There's administrative time, but you're building a bigger program. You don't have as much time to do that. So I think everybody has to look at that and figure out at different stages of your career, how much time do you have. And there's probably a benefit. It's probably like the benefit of participation goes up, but then there's more of a plateau at a certain point, and you got to figure out where you want to plateau. As opposed, you may get incremental benefit by spending another hour with it compared to the first hour you spent.
I have a personal experience also learning good habits from Twitter. I followed Sunil Rao to see what time he started tweeting, so I got notification from him. So every 5 o'clock in the morning, he's tweeting. So, oh my God, this guy wakes up at 5? So I said, I started waking up at 5, and since then I have been more productive. So I think it's a good habit to learn from Twitter. So I'm watching you.
He goes to sleep at 5.
And I think, the reality is you can make the tool whatever you want. Like if you're starting, you just want to observe and learn from people that are sharing research or cases, you can just do that. You don't need to become actively involved right away up front. But if you want to, there's different hats that you can wear. For example, the reality is that even though I would love that some of our research is in the New England every day, it's not there. So it's in sometimes other journals. And if you want to improve the message to that, you can post that, an abstract, a paper. And I can tell you that even though we look at traditional metrics like citations, you probably get 2,000, 3,000, you get thousands of views using social media that you don't get to the traditional. Not everybody's going to go to this X journal in some place. So for the purpose of research, you can do it that way. And I'll just share quickly how I got into it. I got into it because I think 4 or 5 years ago, I went to ACC and I was walking around and I saw these flat screens of what was happening at the other rooms. Here's a result of late-breaking clinical trials in this other room. Here is Dr. Bilakis talking about this in this room. You can only be in one place at one particular time. So it became a very powerful tool to be aware what was happening or whether I was in the wrong place and had to be elsewhere because something else hot was happening. And that's how I got into it. And lastly, to that same regard is if you're in an academic or have a lot of peers that you are learning from them, this may not be as powerful, but think about the entire world. There are people that are in more remote places worldwide that now through this sort of network, they have the opportunity to see what Manos Relakis, what Sunil Rao, and what others are posting or sharing, and they can interact with them one-to-one. That it's really a unique transformational experience.
One last comment also. As of today, as of an hour ago, I look at the metrics. The CVI 2017 has 1.1 million impression, meaning it's reaching up to 1.1 million people. So you can't say we have 780 people here, but we're making impact on 1.1 million people. That's one thing. The other thing for people not on social media, if you have Nidhu Berlakis, Sunil Rao, and Tim Henry, and Samir Ghafoor in the room, and they are on social media, means you have to be on social media. With our first social media session, we had nobody. We have all fellows who came for courtesy. Oh, Chadi, I will come and see your fellow. Or for Sheila, as a courtesy, they came and watch it. But now I see this audience, I think it has potential. So definitely, whoever not on social media, you should be.
You're definitely my colleague because I was thinking the exact same thing. What I wanted to tell all the fellows in the room is that if you think about every person who I asked to speak, that's hashtag Hokum, hashtag CTO, hashtag radio. So this is the power of the hashtag, and this is the value of you can actually use the hashtag to search. I've searched CTO at night just to, bed reading. It's interesting. You see the cases that they've done. You've seen the guide catheters. Whatever you're interested in has a hashtag. And that's the power of using Twitter as an information resource to follow these interventional cardiologists that we come to national meetings and we hope to get the opportunity to get some face time with. And with that being said, you guys have to get more of your colleagues on the social media space so we can continue to regulate the content of information that's being posted. And Dr. Tim Henry, shout out to you for coming because you're not on Twitter. And just so everybody knows, he's hashtag STEMI. He's talking about STEMI and all his great STEMI receiving and cardiogenic shock. And we need him on Twitter. And just so you guys know, Aaron Grantham joined Twitter today, thanks to Rajiv Gulati, who joined Twitter with Radio First. So this is the movement that we need from the course directors who really invested in us coming to have this session. And really, you can see now with 1.1 million impressions, I hope they see that they made the right move. We need to get more interventional cardiologists, mid, senior, and even early career in this space. We'll be around for more questions, but we've reached our time. Thank you so much for coming.
I want to say, guys, you are hired for next year. So July 26, 28 next year, you got a bigger session. Thank you very much. The phenomenal work. Thank you.